the experience did you guys have the experience of like listening to this album was like watching a skate video a little bit?
Yeah, wow, Gary, I didn't think about that.
Can you elaborate on that a
But
little?
yeah, because I think I may agree with you.
Welcome back, everybody. We are back. The rap lizards have returned. Welcome to Do It Yourself Music Appreciation, the only show where two Jews and a Guyanese dude talk about hip hop.
Love that.
I am joined, as always, by my man Dion. How you doing, man?
Chilling, man. Chilling.
Yeah. Had a good week.
I think I had a good week. A little bit busy. Had to kind of cram the album listening, but this is actually a good album for cramming. we'll get to that later, but it's got a singular theme. But again, we'll get to it. But Gary, how's your week been?
What up, peeps? It was good. Backdrop of Redman, and it was some good nuanced Redman. I also felt like I wish I had 3 more weeks to listen to this to like really get
a
deep and find out.
Jam-packed album.
Also, like, I don't know. I found out I don't know shit about Redman. Like, what I thought I understood about Redman's music from listening to what little of it I did and I loved, I found out that, I loved it, but I don't know shit about Redman. So I was learning throughout this whole week.
Nice.
So Gary alluded to his pick. Actually, is an interesting audible he pulled last week. So each week, one of us picks an album we love, and then the rest of us, we all listen and we come back and we talk about the things we love about an album. That's the whole point of this show. We decidedly want to keep it to music we love, or at least that one of us loves, and then we go into what it is about music in general, and in particular hip-hop, that moves us, that motivates us, that inspires us, and it's best to do it with music we love, right? So we didn't want to make this a review show. Oh, don't listen to this album, it's whack, or I didn't much care for the lyrics, on blah 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 blah. No, this is appreciation of music at its finest, and so a little peek behind the curtain for the listeners is we have a massive spreadsheet that we've all contributed to.
I'm pretty proud of.
Of just albums that are on the docket that could be pulled up at any time as one of our picks. And Gary actually picked one of Dion's list because it was in a previous episode he mentioned, I love Redman, but I never heard this Redman album. So let's do Dare Iz A Darkside, his second release. And it was as I said, it's his, in the last episode, it's his most controversial album, and it's his weirdest album for sure. So Gary, hit me with the, what it was like hearing Dare Iz A Darkside for the first time.
Well, there are 20 tracks on this album.
It's a marathon.
And it's a marathon. It's one of those 90s albums that we talk about that's like, wait a second, this album might have too many tracks. Anyway, I enjoyed the listen. First time through, I was, it was the experience that I got listening to the album that preceded this that was super popular. I think it was Redman's first album on this scale.
Massive hit, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the impression that I got just listening to it without reading any of the backstory, any of the commentary, any of Redman's commentary on the album, I'm like, this is a great. I'm getting a lot of the Redman experience, the flavor that I got from that I loved, and then listening to a couple of times through, and also keeping in mind that we've been listening to different rap albums, hip hop albums, mostly hip hop albums anyway. Like one per week almost for the last couple of months. So I'm better at this and more analytical than I was 3 months ago. So
it's been amazing watching you grow, Gary.
Oh yeah, I've grown. My beard has grown. The reason I bring that up is having gone through listens 2, 3, 4, and 5 of this album, I'm also thinking about it a little bit differently because we've been listening to how hip-hop albums are structured and talking about it. And if I were to sum up the epiphany I had about this album was this sounds like the B-side, the extended B-side of what? And that's not
yeah.
a terrible thing. That's not a bad thing. It's not a criticism, but it's like when you think about other albums that felt like B-sides that are that have withstood the test of time. I mentioned to you guys in our chat, "Robin the Hood" by Sublime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Another album that like went after a big successful album and had some like it was weird,
man.
It was weird, and in some sense, it was kind of the afterbirth of the initial successful album. Right, it had many of the same ingredients, but maybe not the same cohesiveness. So that was my impression. I had a great experience listening to it, but it was definitely nuanced.
It's funny you say that, man. It's I think a lot of people's take on this album. This is, for lack of a better term, we mentioned this about Anarchy when we first started doing this show, which was released as a bonus episode. It's like almost like the bastard redheaded stepchild of Redman's discography.
Yeah.
He doesn't perform it, the songs from it. It was recorded during a very dark time in his life. He even admits he was on a lot of different substances and is in a dark place.
And it's pretty obvious with at least a couple of these songs.
And it is one of those classic situations, which happens more often than we think, that it's the sophomore slump that people call it. Now, my opinion of this album isn't necessarily most people's critical opinions of this album. I shared an article with you guys that I'm in agreement with, that like you either love this album, if you're a Redman fan, right, or a hip hop fan, and you've heard this album, you either fucking love it, or you're like, ooh, Redman, like this ain't the Redman that I know. And it's interesting. I could get into all the differences, similarities, and all that, and I'm sure we will. But to start it off, I'll say it is his most out of control and uncontained album. There's not much tethering him to a unified direction or theme. It's kind of like his mind on drugs, going in a million different directions, and also the production is a bit more wild and unfiltered as well. And we'll get into that a little more as we go on, especially in the sample sources and what he was inspired by on what compared to what he was inspired by on this album that I took in from my own analytics. But D, this was on your list, and I know is this your favorite Redman album?
What's funny? I kind of use this. One of our criteria for picking albums, like not only is it like albums that we love, but also albums that we think we may love that we also kind of want to learn a little bit more of. And this is one of those. This is for me an album that falls in that category where I knew that I liked the vibe of this album. I don't remember the last time I heard it, and I was like, you know what? Let me add this to the list because I think this is a great album, and I want to use this for me to sort of learn a little bit more and like get back into the brain of it. So is it? I think
we all had that experience, Steve. By the way.
Exactly.
It was an interesting week, and I think we're for sure. I'm in agreement with you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that was pretty much it. That was the reason why it was on my list. I like the darkness. I like you mentioned Anarchy, like not only physically like the red album cover, obviously, but also it is kind of like that sort of like bastard stepchild of an album that's kind of forgotten, but not really. But it's got some bangers, man. It's got some bangers.
Totally. And I think it doesn't deserve necessarily the flack it has received.
No.
This has happened many times when an artist has this debut that shocks the world, or that really is like a critical darling and a financial success. If their next release isn't in that lane and they take a left turn, and this is certainly a left turn from What the Album. What the Album was this huge thing, and it was 91 or 92.
92,
do you know,
I think. I'm pretty sure 92. Pretty sure.
Early 90s, boom bap, Eric Sermon produced classic with just this new style of rapping from Redman. Beast type of shit, I'll be honest, his early 90s output is like in the back part of my favorite of his I love his 2000s, early 2000s to mid 2000s
Yeah.
releases. Really 98 to like mid 2000s.
Especially the shit he does with meth.
Oh yeah. There's like, I think his true excellent highest form is in that area. But, you know, this you know, what the album was this huge success, right? And then he came out with this other, I mean, I wouldn't say he wasn't inspired on this album. I think he was just inspired by darker things, and there were darker and more problematic things going on in his life from what I read. And his mind was in a different place. So any artist, true artist, is going to create somewhat based on feeling, not necessarily for success or for financial gain. But if you're an artist, and I do consider Redman a true artist, you know, he was just in a different place. So the output sounded like a true left turn, and it got panned. You know, this was just not an album that landed with fans or critics at the time. This has happened before.
It was popular though. Like it immediately went. At least it didn't go like, I mean, whatever. By record industry standards, there's the platinum, gold, whatever, wood, as Dr. Octagon or as Cool Keith says, right? But like this went gold right away. It didn't get very far past that, but it was successful by most standards.
It went gold on the strength of his name, I think. You know what I mean? And then kind of got forgotten. Definitely critics hated it. You know, and this is not the first time this happened. Like I said, De La Soul, for instance, right? Their first album, a bona fide classic in 3 Feet High and Rising. They got labeled hippie hop. Some of the other parts of hip hop, of the hip hop world and industry, maybe were saying these guys are, you know, they're not really part of our situation. And for whatever reason, they released a completely different album in De La Soul is Dead, which is, you know, you could just tell by the title, you know, this was just a different lane. The lyrics, the sounds of the beats, everything was a little darker. And I think some of it was critique and some of it was almost like an FU to everyone, but it also didn't land well in the same way that 3 Feet High and Rising landed. You know what I mean? Right. It's not remembered in the same light. You could even go outside of hip hop. Weezer, I love Weezer's first 2 albums, but when you know, Weezer was this massive, their first album, it was massive. It was, you couldn't escape Buddy Holly, and then they released an album that sounded nothing like that, like a dark, depressed, dank emo album, which is incredible, right? But it took decades for people to come around and be like, oh yeah, Pinkerton is incredible. They hated it. Everyone hated it. So, you know.
Well, I think that Benny, like, a little bit, this album was it was following the narrative of a lot of, you know, VH1 documentaries making, you know, about bands and other documentaries. So, like, I don't know if you guys seen the Beastie Boys documentary that's on
Still haven't seen it. It's on Apple Plus, right?
Yeah. So worth
Spike
seeing,
Jones.
but like familiar storyline though, where a band is inspired and they're maybe early days in their making of music, and they release something that's raw and it catches on with a lot of people, and then there's a lot of pressure right afterwards to follow on, right, deliver more content in that same vein and tour and like do all the things, and then the band gets, you know, strung out on drugs, and then they lose the motivation that started them on this path in the first place, and then they're like, fuck it, for a couple of years, and then they, you know, release different kinds of music and kind of look back and say, that stuff, we're not so proud of that. I think this, without knowing, I think this is probably what happened in this situation, where everybody loved there's something that's raw, that was different. This is before The Coming came out. This is early, this is 1992. Right,
so this was 94.
Yeah, Dare Iz A Darkside is 94, but What is 92?
What was 92, and then there was, you know, shortly afterwards there was probably some pressure to follow on with some material. And Redman, I forget whether he describes it as a song on this album or on future albums, but he's talking about how he likes to chill, and what he likes to do is he likes to get up on an island in a jacuzzi with a big pile of Buddha and smoke blunts out of the jacuzzi for like a week, right, to decompress. And that's something that I like. I kind of love that. I'm like, I kind of want to do that right now. That sounds great. That sounds amazing. But like, that's how he likes to decompress. And clearly he didn't get to do that in this case. Or he went and did that. And like the people that were producing the album, or like, you know, the assistant producers or whatnot, because he was the producer, at least, you know, at least in name, if not more, were like, snap, we need some Redman material. So I'm sure there were B-sides from like him recording What, and there are actually songs that are like the remix, right? Tonight's the Night remix that are part of this album, and Superman Love Part 2, right? Which people might interpret as like, oh, he's just, you know, kind of following on the same ideas, or maybe these are tracks that he chose not to include in the first album because they were too weird and out there. But as you guys know, and as I've come to find out, this actually represents the Redman flavor that will evolve and continue as an ongoing thread in his other albums. Like he has like 6 or 7 Superman Lover adventures right across his albums. So there are some, you know, it's not purely follow on from the first album, but I think a bunch of it probably is.
And you know, that's a perfect segue, Gary. It really is. So you talk about that thematic tale that, or like things that he's done on previous albums that he'll carry it and alter it a little and do it the next version of that on the next albums. Redman is highly influenced, and you see it mostly on the first 2 albums, but you could see it throughout his albums. He's highly inspired by Parliament and Funkadelic. Or as you know, they're basically the same group with very different sounds. Parliament being the more, you know, both George Clinton groups with a rotating cast of characters, but Parliament being the more polished, funky, you know, out there as fuck and not commercial, but they've had more hits and more like bangers on the dance floor. Parliament has, you know, I think the number 1 song is Tear the Roof Off, Give Up the Funk. We want the funk. Gotta have that funk. So like, you know, that's
that song.
You know, the Parliament sound. And then Funkadelic is this like offshoot of Parliament, which is like way more inspired. Like it's funk music with a ton of psychedelic drugs, and like
it's insane.
It's insane. And it's like more guitar oriented, and it's more like if Jimi Hendrix and Jerry Garcia and fucking, you know, Jefferson Airplane wrote songs for Parliament, or you know what I mean? It's just like or Frank Zappa even, you know, like there's this just weird, uncomfortable but awesome grungy funk music.
That the perfect example is in the Maggot Brain, which is one of Funkadelic's biggest albums. And if you and actually to offshoot for that, if you look at the cover of Maggot Brain, clearly the cover inspires the cover of Dare Iz A Darkside.
And that's where I wanted to go with this. So real quick, what the way in which he's most inspired by them, I'd say, is he has these announcements throughout his albums. You're listening to WKYA, kicking your ass radio, or like you know, these callbacks throughout his albums to tell you what you're listening to, what experience you're going on this particular vibe, right? Yeah. Parliament and Funkadelic both did that throughout their careers, right? Whatever the title of the album, Chocolate City, you're tuned in to Chocolate City, and then maybe a different alteration of that throughout the album. Hop aboard the mothership. You're on the Mothership Connection. You know, P-Funk, The Bomb. You know what I mean? All these
do you think that inspired Snoop Dogg's albums?
I was just about to say, Gary. I was just about to say that. It had to. Yeah.
The G-Funk movement of the West Coast, right? Like the G-Funk is literally gangster rap over P-Funk samples. That's where the name G-Funk came from. Most clearly, masterfully done by Dr. Dre on albums like Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style, on albums like The Chronic. That's the epitome of G-Funk. I wouldn't call Redman G-Funk just because it's same sample sources, but flipped in a different way.
Yeah.
With more East Coast,
more into boom bap. Yeah, exactly.
You know, the G-Funk sound is this whole other.
That's some Cali shit.
and honestly, Dre's approach is slicker. You know, a little more polished, a little more. sorry, Gary, like, of the militant Steely Dan production, just like everything's gotta click perfectly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd say that Redman's approach, with a lot of Eric Sermon, he's directly involved in this production, a little more, not sloppy, but dirty, dusty.
Yeah, gutter.
You know what I mean?
Gutter.
Yeah. So that's those narratives, those announcements, those like reminding you what you're tuned into and what experience you're on is very Parliament and Funkadelic inspired. The first album, What the Album, I'd say is way more Parliament inspired. And this album, I'd say, is way more Funkadelic inspired. If you go, like you said, Dion, the album covers, if you compare the album of Dare Iz A Darkside to the album cover of Maggot Brain, it's basically...
It's the same thing.
It's a head buried in the ground screaming.
And then,
you know what I mean?
And then it was even taken another step later on, a few years ago. Childish Gambino has an album, Awaken My Love, which is a great art. I mean, it's that album similar. I believe it is a concept album. Similar, like sort of dark themes and everything like that. But if you look at the cover, same thing. A black face coming out of dirt, and it looks beautiful. Except this one is like a blue tint. The Maggot Brain is like a black and yellow tint. Like the tints are different.
But by the way,
like
even the hairdo is a brushed out, kind of Afro haircut.
Yep, just like Maggot Brain.
Exactly.
Now, so that should, even looking at the cover, if you're on that tip of Parliament and Funkadelic, you should know, okay, this is clearly a Maggot Brain inspired cover. And then as you start to get into the album, this is, the wild, unpredictable, dirty Funkadelic shit is all over this. And he even calls out a lot of the names. One of the song titles is the same song, or maybe more
Cosmic
than one,
Slop, right?
Cosmic Slop, which is a great album and song.
That was a dope song.
Yep.
Yeah, man. That's the trip we're on this album. And let me tell you something. If you compare What the Album to this as the same way you would compare, let's say, Mothership Connection to Cosmic Slop, or one of my favorite album titles, Standing on the Verge of Getting It On. If you compare the two, there's the disparity or the differences between these two albums. It'll really match up. I think he really was like in a darker place and in a more wild, uncontained place. So he went on the Funkadelic trip this time, which is such a cool, only dorks like us might, maybe more than us, but to catch that, it's interesting, and it makes more sense in that theme, at least. So, Gary.
Yep.
What positives, right? What did you like? I know you said this was a surprise, right? Mm-hmm. This was like not what you expected. What the album, backwards and forwards. What were like the differences that were good in your mind on this album?
Benny, the thing is, I had no idea what to expect, and it was a weird way to make a choice for, hey, what should we listen to? It was definitely me leaning on the fact that somebody did their homework, and that's Dion. But I knew I wanted to listen. I wanted to learn something new, and my, kind of, if I look at my Spotify listening habits, they tend to be the same music unless somebody injects something new in. With high praise or force, which usually is you guys. So I was looking for something new that I haven't listened to, and I wanted to learn more about Redman. And as a result, I did. I was surprised by, I guess I was surprised by the rawness of this album. And then now that I've learned a bit about it and understand the context of what it just came after, and maybe what some of the material was based on, and also the fact that Redman was just on like a unending acid trip during this entire production process, which he does not talk about in this in the lyrics, right? He doesn't talk about his kind of psychedelic exploration.
But
he
you
talks
could tell.
about right, like this guy is way out there in this. It sounded awesome. I guess what surprised me was some of the running themes that he had established while maybe in this fugue state. The fact that he went with Superman Lover Part 2, and it was like he decided that he's a great storyteller, and that's something that he loved to do and that he does really well, and he wants to continue and tell these stories of living in the hood, right? It's something that I actually I love his storytelling, and it's something that is somewhat relatable. When I think about any musician that talks about living in like urban poverty, I think Redman is somebody that I could relate to in that stuff is really entertaining, and it does paint a picture that I've seen in some form growing up, right? Just growing up in urban poverty for some of my upbringing,
And Gary, part of that is probably why you associate that is because of Redman having the greatest episode of MTV Cribs ever.
Yes,
if you remember.
Oh, it's so good.
The only one that should ever be spoken about.
Seriously.
Can we talk about that? Because this is great context for Redman as a character. When was that film, by the way? That was like late 90s,
I think
2001.
Right?
Yeah, early 2000s for sure. But this wildly successful rapper who clearly has the means, his idea, and it clearly was his idea of a joke. Like I'm assuming he had another couple other houses, well, or maybe not.
I don't know, man.
But if that was his house, it was his choice to live that way. And if it wasn't his house, then it's also a deliberate choice that he's making to present his character this way.
Exactly.
I wanna subscribe to the train of thought that was his primary place of residence. that he just doesn't come off, even in interviews, in any type of background thing, as an extravagant person. He seems humble as fuck.
Not only humble, but just like that, that humble but silly motherfucker. And I think that's why he's like a lot of people don't think of him as one of the GOATs. Is because like the first thing you think of like how high, you think of him being funny, but then you realize that no, this dude's a fucking assassin, and that's why he's
one of the fucking GOATs.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like hands down. It's not like the argument is not even there. It's
criminally left out of so many conversations.
Yeah. But I think part of that is because like you don't expect it. Like it's like this tall like sort of lanky, just like silly dude who's like really funny, smokes a lot of weed. And not that either of these like are things that are reasons why someone shouldn't be a good MC, but again, you're not like people like when you think of like the giants of rap, like none of them are really like like have that kind of personality. Like Jay doesn't, Royce, like a lot of these people like they're like more serious dudes overall. Not that they're completely serious, but like they're not like Redman. Like Redman
they carry themselves as like almost like, if I am going to be one of the greatest, I got to, I don't know for sure, but they seem to carry themselves in a way like, I got to be serious, and I got to, I'm not going to clown. I'm not going to be a clown.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And Benny, you asked me what surprised me about this listening experience. Yeah. Well, just going back to that, I think it's this element of it where Redman, similar to how similar to how Inspector Deck, when we were talking about Czarface, I realized that to me, Inspector Deck was kind of the spirit of what I loved about the early Wu-Tang Clan stuff. He kind of embodied it, and in fact, he carried it. Redman, I think, seeded a lot about what I love in 90s hip-hop and also kind of the Busta Rhymes style of hip-hop. Yeah. Right? Like, now, he helped seed that, and that was a surprise to me. I didn't realize that.
100%, Gary. I know we said we were going to talk about the Cribs thing. Hopefully we do dissect that a little bit, because I think it's like a peek into his brain. But I gotta piggyback off that, man. And I never put it together until this week. I've heard this album before. It's definitely one of the albums of his I've heard the least, but I've heard it before. But this week, I think I texted you guys. I was like, man, you could really... I thought there was no father to Busta Rhymes' style. I really thought that.
Same.
If you listen to The Coming and if you listen to When Disaster Strikes, I literally thought he pulled that out of thin air. And, man, there is some vocal inflection, some flow, this uncontained dragon-esque, just wildness, but flow patterns and vocal inflections that are just whoa.
There's literally, I forget what
this
song it is.
inspired Busta Rhymes, and I know I never heard him say it, but how could it not?
Yeah. There's literally a song. I forget which song it is, but like literally, there's a line where Redman goes "rawr" exactly the way Busta does the dragon. So it's like, yeah, you could think of it like a sort of mental, sort of spiritual influence, but that's a clear like just physical influence right there. Like, what you're hearing.
Yeah, and in the flow pattern.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, that was just a one minor example, but yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, just in general, like you listen to this album, and not only is it the inflection, the sort of rhyme patterns and everything like that, just the general overall style of it, it very much feels like Busta Rhymes. Maybe that's because both of them have that sort of boom bap bass while having sort of out there beats. And that is
and to be fair, Busta Rhymes was rapping that way in 1991.
That's right, LONS.
Yeah. Exactly. So maybe they just shared a brain or had shared.
Well, it is New York City 90s, early 90s boom bap. That was a relatively small scene, and everybody was somewhat on the same wavelength. But you know what? There was an energy that's shared here. I think, as Kanye West put it in a tweet not so long ago, it's that dragon energy, right? I think that Redman and Busta Rhymes share a kind of energy in that era of their music. That was a big surprise to me. That was cool.
He does call out. He calls out a bunch of MCs, and not just rappers, but he calls out musicians from all different genres throughout his album. But on Bobby Head to This, there's that line where he goes, "I give props to real MCs like KRS-One, Cool G Rap, Buckshot, Busta Me. I'm from the East Coast." He's like, he gives shout outs to these people. And when I was listening, I was like, wow, like he's throwing flowers for the living, and not just for people who were at the time kind of like obviously like famous and popular and good in their own right. But you realize that legends at the time, and who only became even bigger since. But you realize that wow, these guys were all young. I just did the math on all four of the people he just mentioned. All of them were under 30 at the point where he went when he mentioned this. You realize that? KRS was 29, Cool G was 26, wow. Buckshot was 20, Busta was 22 when this album came out, when Redman shouted them out. Wow. So it's just it's interesting. Like
they always seem older than us because we were kids when
exactly.
It came out.
Exactly. But it's not just that. It's also like think of it now. It's like like someone like Tyler the Creator. Like think of all like the young like new really good rappers now. Tyler, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar. All those guys are also about this age, about 29, 30. Like they're kind of even older, and we think of them as the young guys, but they're kind of older than what even half of these guys are, and they were legends at the time. I was going off on a tangent, but my original point was. I just think that they were just influencing each other. I think that's exactly what it is. It wasn't necessarily that Busta took from Redman or Redman took from Busta or KRS. Obviously you have to go by who came out. What order these artists came out. But overall, I just think that they were just like I think the East Coasters were just like feeding off each other, and that was really cool.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that they Busta was releasing music in some form of this style before this album, before What came out. And before, when I think of What, I think that this is very much has a dotted line to What, so I keep going back to 1992. Yeah. But that was, it's like it's back and forth, it's give and take, it's building off of one another's releases. If not in person, chilling and collaboration. I think he was actually mentioned a couple of times on this album, Busta.
At least once.
And that's that style of Redman that we see here, I think this is his, comparatively with What, I'd say this is his more Busta-esque sound. He's a little more uncontained on this album, I'd say. He's a little more reckless, a little more all over the place. Just a bit.
And an example of that I think actually serves in a positive and kind of helps with this, in that being sort of all over the place, is in that same song, Bobby Head to This. Literally, the first half of the song is a straight up funk song. But obviously the beat throughout it is funky, but like Redman's, like when he comes in with his vocals, he doesn't start rapping until literally about halfway through. Like he's talking and he's doing that like sort of funk, like sort of vocal, like welcome to this, blah, 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 like that sort of spacey, airy thing. And then if you notice, if you listen to that song again, it's like when he starts to rap, it's so like weaved in seamlessly to what he was originally saying. Like he goes from like going on a tangent to all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, now he's rhyming. Let me start to pay attention. But that's kind of that reckless nature that you were talking about. But in this case, like it works. It's great. It's like perfectly weaved in.
A lot of it lands.
Exactly. And it's like it's basically his way of saying, yeah, like I'm gonna let you know this is a funk album. Like at its at its core, it's hip hop. I'm gonna get into the hip hop, but again, what this song tells you is that first and foremost, like funk was on my brain.
Totally.
Yeah, I just think it was great.
And that style that that reckless can have a negative connotation, and I don't mean it negatively. I'd say that this unchained and untethered to a direction even falls into his flow on this whole project, right? He is all over the map in his flows on one song. Patterns that switch every few bars like a drunken master. You know what I mean? Like just every which way he's going, he's switching it up. And there's a lot of syllables in here. There's a lot of hibbity bibbity, I don't mean that as an insult, but like rapid fire into a flexed out inflection of his vocals into a different style of rapid fire. It's
complex.
It's complex
really?
And all over the map.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas every subsequent release after this one, you watch him, Muddy Waters, which I think a lot of people consider as his zenith. I think hip hop heads, right? Like, I don't know critically how it landed, but in the hip hop conversation, his classic is usually Muddy Waters, which is his next album. Muddy Waters onto I think it's called Docs the Name 2000, which came out in 98, and then Malpractice, or there might Red Gone Wild, I think before that. At any rate,
Blackout after Docs the Name, but yeah.
Right, you watch him singularize. I don't know if that's a word, but take his. Today. Yeah, there you go. You watch
singularize.
Yeah, man. New album title. No, you watch him concentrate his flows and patterns into this more cohesive song first idea, right? So it's no longer watch me flex and be out of control on the mic and not have much rhyme or reason or patterns to my patterns. Where if you listen to him on Docs the Name 98, he is simplified in his approach. It's still masterful.
It's much more user friendly though. That's the time where even I got into Redman. That was my introduction to Redman. Docs the Name, right? It had a bunch of just funny tracks. Like there were music videos that were pretty easy to watch as a mainstream thing and were like entertaining, right? But it wasn't on this level of density that we're at now. There's some gems in here, man. There's some gems in here, guys. I think that there's I think in seeing, so going back for a second to the feeling that I get listening to this and how it takes me back to growing up was things happen like that. There aren't many benefits to living in urban poverty. In fact, there are very few. But they do exist. And one of those benefits is that you will have adventures. Adventures happen. Unexpected things happen to you. And Redman, I think his storytelling style is kind of like that, where he will... so Superman Lover, those tracks invariably have a structure to them, the stories that he tells. Yeah. The story is he's, some superhero, he's some superhero version of himself. He's getting into, sexually adventurous... kind of situations.
He's like a superhero porn star.
Yeah, right. He's like a superhero sex guy. He's just super enthusiastic about just describing the most elaborate, filthiest sexual situations.
And that second verse it's so good. It's such a great storytelling example. So before we get to the story itself, the structure I think remains the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But he'll get into some situation where he's going to use his superpowers. Everybody has a good time, but then before everything works out well,
some unexpected shit happens. Like the
twist.
The twist is like whoever he's with is like not who he expected, or is like, you know, a spy with like a knife looking to stab him, but because he's a Superman lover, he's got X-ray vision, so he sees the knife. You know, like
I think in this case, Gary, I think that the moment that happens in this song in part 2 is where he goes, she rushed me into the room and stripped me out of my attire. She tied me to the bedpost and then she lit the room on fire. And then from that moment to the end of the song, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Before that, it was all good. It was all gravy. Like it was a hookup. It was good to happen. It was bad or whatever. And all of a sudden, she sets the room on fire. And then like now there's guns involved and like it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. The story always goes off the deep end, and it's so good.
It's so good.
I think that's like one thing you could always count on him for, on his wildest album, in this one, on his more polished examples later on. He's gonna make you laugh with something shocking.
Yes.
He's so good at that shocking twist of events in a story, or a shocking punchline that where you just go, oh my god, I can't believe you just said that. There's one on Meth and Red's album that I don't even want to quote because someone might record me saying it and say, look what Ben Lander just said. But it's like it's on like the first one or two songs, and he says it. I go, oh my god!
We'll leave it up to the imagination.
I can't believe he just said that. You know what I mean? Like, that's illegal.
Hold on. Let's say it.
Should we do a pause?
Let's say it and cut it out because I need to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So he goes.
It's good.
Yo, it's fucking bad.
It's
like
good.
You know, like he goes something like, you need to back 4 acres. Yo, Redman, no.
Redman, you know.
All right, I just took a screenshot of this timestamp because we cannot forget to take this part.
I don't ever want to be recorded saying that.
Yep.
Anyway,
Okay,
you have to clap back in. Just go.
All right, so you know, but that story, you're right, Gary. It was like such, like the twist in a story in a rap song. That's a hard thing to pull off.
Yeah.
You know, I think about like the greatest twist ever, in my opinion, is probably Common's "I Used to Love Her." Right at the end, oh, he's talking about hip hop. Spoiler alert. But you know, that's a twist. But like Redman's way of just throwing a monkey wrench in the situation.
Actually, you know who
incredible.
Did this again, or who also did this well in an album we just mentioned in comparison to this, was Busta in what was it, The Heist or Trip Out of Town, that ends where it's like the director yelled cut. That was one of the greatest twists I've ever heard in a rap song.
Oh, you're right. I think it was.
It was on Anarchy, but was it The Heist?
Either The Heist or Trip Out.
I always mix up because they're kind of like
great acting, guys.
Yeah, good acting, motherfuckers.
I forgot which one. You're right.
But yeah, but I'm not taking away from what you said here. But yeah, that's just another great example of it. But the point is, though, you're right. It is rare, and it's pulling it off well, because you could put a twist in a song, but you may not get it until like after like the third listen. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I guess it did kind of switch. Whereas this is like, oh no, you.
Oh my god, the room's on fire.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, now I'm gonna pay even more attention. I want to know what the hell's gonna happen to this dude.
Yeah. And I think that's this album in a nutshell. It's incredible moments surrounded by some slop. Like some moments of messiness and disarray. But in that is really genius stuff. I think it's Redman like you've never heard him before or since.
Yeah.
And that's like that in itself makes it very cool to listen to.
Did you get the experience did you guys have the experience of like listening to this album was like watching a skate video a little bit?
Yeah, wow, Gary, I didn't think about that.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, because I think I may agree with you.
Yeah, I might be dead wrong about this, but like I had this feeling and I wrote it down. And when you're watching like a skater that has just amazing style, where you just want to watch them skate no matter what they do, but once in a while they break out something technical or some ground tricks, or you just like skate videos are, you have a camera usually mounted on another skateboarder being held by another skateboarder, following the pro skater as they go through a kind of routine that they plan, right? They're going down this street, they'll do a downhill, they'll do power slide to like slow down, and they'll hit a ramp or whatever, but they've planned out this whole kind of thing, and you're following them through a story. And some of the crazier skate videos are like, now they're gonna grind a like rooftop of a shed that's gonna be set on fire, and then they're gonna be
in suits,
right, in suits, and then they'll jump off a bridge at the end, right? Like, so this was a little bit like watching that. Like, Redman's clearly got amazing skills. He's like, as a storyteller, as a lyricist, right, with his flow, it's like you're watching somebody with amazing style, and then they're taking you on these really unexpected twists in an adventure. I thought it was like watching a really good skate video.
That was that's
spot
genius.
on.
That is fucking genius. I didn't think about that at all. And again, when you first said it, my brain is like, wait, I think I agree with that, but I wanted to hear more. And what you just elaborated, that is perfect. Yes,
I'll do you one. Agree. Yeah, I'll do you one further, Gary. Everything you just said, and also if you go back to like skate videos from, like, let's say the 90s,
I was just going to say the 90s.
to the 2000s, they also had these hijinks where like the camera was still on, and like these two Asian dudes are doing like fighting each other martial arts style, really, like in the schoolyard where they're skating, and they start filming, or like they'll interview this like guy who's cracked out, like, so what do you think of skateboarding? And they'll just like,
even we did that when we made skate
videos. I was gonna say we actually did that. Skateboarding.
There's something about the hijinks of like an old school skate video that like the unpredictable, like what are you gonna find in the wild of the streets, that is also like kind of like this album. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Dion, you are our lyric professor. I know I didn't write anything down because I don't ever take notes. Do you have lyrics that jumped out at you do you have anything?
A couple. On Journey Through the Dark Side, there's a couple.
Great song.
One of them is great. It's like, did I mention my lyrical format gets more Oz than a dentist? Like, lines like this is what makes Redman so special, where it's like, and we've mentioned this before about other rappers, but it's like the so things dope. You don't think of to rhyme, like the words and like the sort of, I don't know, like vocal things.
I love a line where more blank than a blank is like it's like a rap. It's almost like a challenge that all rappers should be met with at some point in their life. Like, just say you have more blanks than a blank and see what you come up with. Exactly. And Redman just slayed that one. It's more Oz than a dentist.
It makes perfect sense, but it's not something that you would think about. And then also that song also has a great line. That as one of my listens, I was listening to this in a car. I went into the office earlier this week, and I'm coming back home, about to go through the BQE. Through the Battery Tunnel. So I'm in Manhattan. I have that this in New York. I'm just surrounded by just pure New York. Right, about to go back into Brooklyn. And in that same song, Journey Through the Dark Side, it ends with him going, 9X can't even reach my techniques or rap sheets. And I heard that, I was like, yo, what did he just fucking say? I rewound it like 4 times. It just brought me back. Like, first of all, like 9X, yo, like.
Such a moment in time.
Such a New York fucking thing. Like, those of you that don't know, 9X basically had the monopoly on telephones in New York and New England. I didn't realize it was New England too, but all throughout the 90s. And then basically they were forced to essentially
share the wealth.
Yeah, exactly. They 9X then became Verizon. And the rest was history. But yeah, if you were in New York in the 80s and 90s, like, you knew, like, basically what he's saying there is like, yo, the only like people that can convey communication information like this is 9X, and they can't even get to my techniques. Like, I'm that fucking good. I don't know. It's like, it's kind of like a throwaway line, but not really. But like, I remember hearing that in the car, and I was just like, yo, what the hell did he just say? That was fucking dope.
I love snapshots in time when you listen to a line. I'm sure we'll mention it again, but like Phife Dawg has a line on Tribe's third album, Beats Rhymes of Life, where he says, you couldn't converse if you had fucking React juice, which is like a reference to the most 90s, like 1 year of 90s sneaker manufacturing. Anyway,
and that's also, it's funny because that, like, things like that is also how artists, because like the old adage, like, never say the year, like, keep the shit timeless, but they do reference years and eras in doing things like that. Like, they'll reference, and
it totally dates that music.
It totally dates
in such a cool way, though.
Yeah, exactly. In on Neurotic, he goes, I'm swift like a motherfucking gift for Christmas when I send my vapors off like Hall's mentholyptus. Mentholyptus. Like, yo, first of all, yeah, I even had to, like, it's like, again, one of those things was like, yeah, you think of Hall's, like, just cough drop or whatever. Menthol. But, like, technically, the full name of it is, mentholyptus. It's like, who the hell puts that in a mainstream rap song? But it works. He rhymed it with Christmas.
So
like,
good
it's great.
Yo,
he really pulls words out of the sky that, like, fit in such a cool, and I love, like, that's a perfect example of Redman. Calls mentholyptus, like, it's just like the way in which he says mentholyptus is special and unlike any other rapper.
It's almost Doom-like, to be honest. Gary, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that, like Benny, I didn't note many lines that stood out to me as like, oh snap, that made me rewind and think about that line. I had to rewind it 4 times and, like, I wrote it down. But there were moments in here that, I mean, it was just all about the feeling. Like, let's say that song, What It Look Like. And I think the way that he names his songs, he kind of spells out. What is that? What is that called? What's the word for that? When you phonetically spell things? Oh, I guess that's the word, phonetically.
I think that's
he spells out kind of his song titles phonetically. Like, for example, the album title, Dare Iz A Darkside, Dareiz A Darkside. Anyway, so, like, What It Looked Like is something that I'm going to be bumping in the back of my mind until the next time I listen to this album. I'm actually just thirsty to listen to that song again and nod my head to it. What It Looked Like. So, like, there's that. He talks about, without traffic, I flow like the BQE.
Yeah.
Like,
I was gonna, gonna mention that's another very New York inside joke line. Like, that the BQ has been fucked since get go, man.
But that feeling when it's empty, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. That like, that's from like 2:13 a.m. to like 4:47 a.m.
Yeah, that's
on any
when
given day.
when there's no cops out, and
cops.
you can just fly.
Oh my God.
And that's like that jumped out at me too, Gary. Thank you for reminding me. That's such a, like, that is a, here's a line for people who live in the New York area only. Even though he's from Jersey,
but
he's around, like, this area. Like, no one even understands what that means. Like, what does it say? It one more time, Gary.
Without traffic, I flow like the BQE. This is just like one line in his songs. It's not
without traffic, I flow like the BQE. So the BQE sucks most of the times, but without traffic, it's incredible. It's one of the most free feelings there is. Driving.
Driving through New York City with no traffic is such a rarity, but it's also just exhilarating. Like, this is New York City, and I'm just driving through it at my own pace. At my own skill level. It's great. And I think that song also, we're talking about how the style of this album also kind of seeded some of the evolution of Busta Rhymes and other kind of wild rap in the 90s, that dragon energy. Like, the chorus of this thing, what it looked like, right? The echo in the background. And then sometimes on top of the echo, there's like just something being said, something being mumbled. Styles that I'm kicking, yes, I'm mad, wicked, right? Just in the background as he kind of cycles through, screaming what it looked like over and over again. It makes for an awesome chorus, a lot of fun.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's actually sampled from. It says it's sampled from Tonight's the Night remix, which is a song on this album. So he's using a sample from a song that comes later on in the album. That's just a little small.
That's the thing, man. Really, I don't think he was around for that decision. I think he was in a hot tub on an island somewhere, in like a colorful room somewhere. I don't know, but he was not part of that decision making process. Having read the. Well, that's my impression. Having read a little bit about the album after listening to it, he's talking about how he was surprised that it did as well as it did, because he was just like not really at the wheel. He wasn't at the wheel, right? So somebody on his team that like knew what stood out about Redman's style, mixed it to sound really good and to use the elements of his music that were loved at the time.
I also got the impression, Gary, on that note, that I did feel that there were other people, perhaps more people in more cooks in the kitchen than on the previous album, but also just by looking at the track listing and how it plays out and how dense and lyrically packed it is for someone who wasn't at the wheel. I have to imagine this album took a while to record and produce. I don't think it was, get back in the booth, a month later, banged out 14 tracks. Here you go. Nice lean, experience. I think this was probably a laborious experience. But also like a lot of material was cultivated, but it just, because it's 20 tracks long, I don't want to use an insulting word, but it's a word to use. This album, it's bloated. It's loaded and bloated. It doesn't, this album could have been released with 5 less songs.
Yes.
And perhaps it might have been talked about in a different or remembered in a different light. I think it's a sin, or not. I don't want to use the word sin, but it's something that happens a lot in 90s releases. Like, CDs hold 74 minutes of music, and artists were like, well, we got to put 74 minutes
maximize it. Yep.
of music on this fucker, or else we're not, getting our money's worth.
Right.
They
know,
whatever.
We were just figuring out, I think, as a human species, how to use this format properly.
It's probably why there's so many skits in 90s albums.
Yeah.
Totally.
Exactly.
Which added a lot,
filler.
actually. I loved that form of space filler. That was cool. But there are some songs
he's a
on
skit
here,
master.
like whether he was in a jacuzzi or not, there are some songs in here that are standout songs from that are related to this album that are not what. So I'm thinking of Basically, another song where he repeats a word and it's a great effect. And rhymes over it. I liked Slide and Rock On. That was
Slide and Rock On is dope.
Super chill, dope song.
Dope.
Can't wait.
Another good storytelling song. The second verse of Slide and Rock On is great. It's like it's the only the very first line of Slide and Rock On is basically like, oh, this is for my boys locked up in jail or whatever. And the second verse is the only one really that kind of alludes to that. It's basically in a slightly, I mean, it's a little bit more serious, but it has some silliness to it. But it's just about that, like like his mama told him not to do this, and he ends up going to jail. Like it's worth a listen. But yeah, just yet again another example of just genius storytelling. Gary, you're gonna say "Can't Wait," right?
Yeah, look,
it's one of my favorite songs too.
I wanted to make this point that there are songs on here that I loved that were that added to the Redman kind of track list that I now identify as like very Redman and the core of the music that I really enjoy. So like I got a lot out of this album. So I don't want to sound like I'm trashing it. I'm just saying that there is a dotted line to what for sure. And I think some of the more cohesive albums that he puts out later, where he was in a mind state that he doesn't disown these days, have probably a little bit more of a unique identity than this compared to his other albums.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect, wow, what a great way to put it, Gary. Like just this, that's something this album lacks and again, none of us are trashing it. I think I had so many moments where I'm like, yes, Redman, I fucking love you, all throughout this week. But one thing it lacks is an identity. It's a hodgepodge of styles and emotions and directions. Wow, yeah. I never put that together.
He was always the guy in the MTV Cribs video, though, right? Like that was never he wasn't trying to be Justin Bieber in any of this, right? Like, not that Justin Bieber, existed as a musical entity at the time.
To his credit, Redman doesn't seem to have changed either. Like the Redman today seems exactly like the Redman of 26 years ago when this came out.
100%.
It's great. Like it's what we were talking about, like with Busta Rhymes. Like, do you have respect for people who don't just don't change, or no, not that don't change, who don't have to change? That's the operative.
Right.
Who don't have to change.
I think Redman is one of these unique characters, similar to Busta, in that he has stood the test of time. Right. He's a name that, maybe the kids don't know him, but like, I don't know. I think he's, And it, I think he's really he's been through, let's say, 4 or 5 different really transformative eras of hip hop, and is still a household name. And I'd say in the same way Royce is a rapper's rapper, all of the greatest rappers hold him in such high regard. Eminem, Until I Collapse, put him as, one of the greatest ever. Royce, there's such a great Royce verse on the Slaughterhouse's second album where he literally says, in describing himself, he goes, G-Rap, Rakim, G-Rap, Redman, I am cut from that cloth. He lists a few of the GOATs, and Redman's one of them. I don't know if I hit all the names. I am cut from that cloth. That's to me, that's a fucking compliment from Royce, but he's so never, sorry, let me rephrase that. He never sacrificed his character, his vision, his willingness to create art in the way that he wants to create it. I've never heard actually there was this one album called Reggie, which I really did not. But aside from all those, aside from that one release, he never really sounded like he was trying to catch up or dumb it down or ride a certain wave that people are riding. You know what I mean? Yeah. He stayed true to, even on that album where he was trying to ride a newer sound underneath him, he still was Redman on top of it.
Well, I think that's that's kind of, I would like to pick that apart if we can, because to me that's got to be one of the ingredients that makes somebody an artist.
A goat.
An artist, right? Just that, whether they're the best artist or they're, an artist that's, appreciated by an audience of one, what makes an artist is somebody who is sticking with a principle or some basic form of their identity, and there's a through line through all of their creation. That
even if styles change, even if sounds change, that who they are in their art is still accurately represented.
That's right. I think that the neighborhood adventures of Redman as a character, they are varied from 1992 through the present day. But from this album through the first MTV Cribs appearance, where let's talk about what happened there, where as a contrast to everybody else's MTV Cribs episode.
Some artists, Gary, on MTV Cribs would literally rent a mansion for the day.
Or the record label with the record label.
Right.
They would rent them a mansion. They'd throw some fucking drink in the fridge.
Mm-hmm. Well, what it is it's an exercise in perpetuating an image, right? And I think Redman used it the very same way, but the image that he chose very deliberately to perpetuate is not one that was generic and would fit with the rest of rap. Instead of renting a giant mansion or hiring a house cleaner, even, he found a house that was the most rundown regular house ever, and it's just
one floor,
very bad in every sense. There's a room where there's
it was in Staten Island, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was in Staten Island.
There was a Staten Island feel to this house, I would say. But not all of Staten Island, but a specific, kind of. Anyway, it's a house that was not very actively maintained, and
bum friend sleeping on the couch.
You got a friend that's
you remember how you had to get
mattress.
in? You remember the doorbell?
No.
The doorbell,
two wires.
It was 2 wires. They had to put together.
Right, so it's super rundown house. It's obviously he's somebody who doesn't have to or doesn't live that way, but that was the image of the Redman he wanted to show. And then he did a follow-up episode of MTV Cribs a couple of years later. Same house. He was looking
10 years later.
He was looking for somebody who might be there, but maybe they're there, maybe they're not. But sure enough, they're there sleeping on a mattress that's on the floor. The mattress is kind of dirty. And then he's talking about his cupboards, how he changed some things in the house and he improved the cupboards. One thing that he changed was he installed some new cupboards that are some IKEA style cupboards, pretty generic. Yeah. And he's look, I took this kitchen and I really Beyonce'd it up.
That's great.
Just wonderful, right? Like
that's the thing about Redman, man. Like that, and that's what we've sort of been talking about. Like he's at the end of the day, he's real. Like he's not gonna. He doesn't give a fuck about what you think about him. He's not gonna. At least it's perception. Maybe that perception is fake in itself. Who knows? I don't think it is, but you just never know. But that's the what he gives off. It's like I'm a real person. I'm gonna do what I think is right and what what's in my head. And like the biggest example of that, if you remember the video for what's the song called? Fuck You. You remember? It's like fuck you, fuck you. You remember that song? You remember that song?
I do.
Video is great. The video is amazing. It's hilarious. The song itself is amazing. But if you remember, the dancers in the video were all like plus size women, and like even like today.
Shout out Redman for that.
Exactly. And like look, today you have you have artists like Lizzo. You have you have rappers like some that'll put sort of bigger not as represented body types in their raps. Like that's kind of like the era that we're in now, where people are more. Accepting is the wrong word, but they're more open to like, hey, this is what reality is, right? Whereas back then, no one was doing that shit. Like, no one even dared put anyone that wasn't like a size 0 or 2 as their music video dancers. But Redman is like, no, fuck that shit. Like, these are real women. I'm gonna do this, and he got respected for it. I'm sure there's some people that they were like, oh, like what are you doing putting all these? But he was like, no, I don't give a shit what you think. Like, this is my video. This is what I'm gonna do, and he's been doing that since the beginning. That's part of the reason why I have such respect for this dude. Like, he's never shied away from being. Just a real dude, I don't know.
I think that might, I'm not sure that that's the case. And Dion, Ben, you guys know more than I do maybe about this. But, I think that this is a character that he chose to create, and he's sticking with a character. I don't think Redman actually lives in a rundown, single floor house.
No, I do. And I did say that.
Judging by his net worth, I doubt that's his primary source. Although I like to believe it's his primary residence.
It ain't.
Here's what else, right? On a more serious note, while making this album, I've read that he was just the drug that he was on was not as he talks about just a massive amount of pot, right? Which is one that's an image that he was perpetuating about Redman the character. Redman the character always rolling up blunts. And has a pile of weed, and it's like that's a fun character, and that might be fun, but that's actually not the tip that he was on. He was on some crazy introspective drugs. He was on LSD, and not only a little bit of LSD, but apparently a lot of LSD, like in a row, right? So that's like him having a crazy introspective experience that he doesn't talk about candidly in this music. Those are conversations that he's having candidly, hopefully with somebody. Right, maybe with his fellow musicians, maybe with some of the people on this album that have gone through crazy shit. Like KRS-One was on a track on this album, a really good track, and that's somebody I'm sure that he would feel comfortable speaking candidly to as like a fellow musician making waves at the time. But that's not coming through in the character that he's portraying here.
He certainly cultivated. You're right, Gary. He cultivated this persona. Right, I think one of the words you could use is dirty. Right, he's just this dirty, street level, and by street level I mean not elevated to holier than thou. Not look how rich I am. Not look how many bitches I have. Even though he does go down that lane of
his prowess is appreciated.
Yeah, he his character in song is certainly. He's like the pothead rapper of all pothead rappers. He is party man, fun, good time, shock value, dirty guy. You know what I mean? But what I will say in response to that is I do believe the person he is in an interview and the person MTV Cribs, I think that was more of a fuck you to like MTV in general. Like literally like all artists, stop renting mansions. Stop. Just be
right. I think he saw how funny and ridiculous things have become, and he's like, "Yeah, let me show you how ridiculous this has become."
Yeah, exactly. It was like almost what's the word?
Satire.
Like comedy satire.
Satire. Yeah. It was like, and you know what else? It was like what Digital Underground did, what Shock G did for in the Humpty Dance. It's like that. The whole point of that song is like that. That's not what he is. That was him saying "fuck you" to the record label who wanted like a more mainstream sound,
more of a
like,
hammer.
Exactly. He's like, yo, that's not my style, and they're like, yo, well, it doesn't matter. We're paying you. You got to do it. So what he did, he just went the complete opposite. He's like, oh, you want me to act the fool? Here's the fool. Now it blew up in his face and became a fucking mega hit. But that's what he was sort of this similar thing that Redman I think is trying to do, almost trying to prove a point, right?
Yeah, and I think that what I'm getting at is as I see. I'm a pretty good judge of character, I think, and I see in his interviews, he's got no walls up. I think that's just like a humble, nice dude in his interviews, and like his interviews, especially with the right interviewer, he goes deep. He gives, like Dion said, flowers to the people around him, to his peers, to his people he admires. I think he's just this tainted personality. Fame has a history of just making someone shitty, and people make excuses for people at the highest level. Oh, well, all the success they've had, they have the right to be smug assholes. If I had that much money or if I was that good at sports, I'd be an asshole too.
I kind of have that opinion about
I know.
A few people,
I didn't want to say Dion has that opinion. But me and Dion have got into this a lot about this elusive quality of humility in famous and successful athletes and musicians. Like, why does success bring about lack of humility? And I don't think it's impossible if you just look at Redman. Sure. Method Man too. I've
literally worked with Method Man. I've met him. He is one of the nicest people I've ever met. And
humility is it's not impossible to have, but I think it's more of a peek behind the curtain of someone's spiritual fitness, someone's level of being in touch with reality and what truly matters in life. And their success, while it brought about comfort, fame, wealth, that people who act in that way know that the true route to happiness is to be more selfless and to be respectful and to not harm others and not make people feel alienated, judged, or disrespected. And so I don't think anyone's ever earned the right to be a smug asshole, but at any rate, Redman is just so fucking humble in his interviews. He's a great guy to watch. He tells us, if you go to just Redman Vlad TV, if you search his Vlad interviews on YouTube, he tells this hilarious story about MC Hammer sending out a hit squad to get him because he said he dissed him on a track. Like, it's crazy. Hammer tried to have him killed.
Brought the hammer down.
yeah, he brought the hammer heavy.
I'm sorry, D. And I know we're pretty far apart on that, but and we don't need to get into that debate now. No. I'm sure we will. It'll
come up, yeah, because I got things to say about it.
Redman is just a humble motherfucker, man. Wire. But one more thing I think needs to be mentioned is skill. Like I was talking about his skill level, about his ability on the mic, how his GOAT levels. He's a syllable master, in my opinion. Punchline god.
Can I give a quick example of that before? Because I think your point is gonna go into this, but on When I Come Around, there's a line where he goes, "Word is bond, it's on. I get it on like Marvin Gaye, starving since the days of kindergarten." Once again. Word is bond, it's on, I get it on like Marvin Gaye, starving since the days of kindergarten. Like, that's one of those things where it's like, all right, yes, okay, on the surface, the two bars, yeah, they don't rhyme, they don't end rhyming with each other, but they're rhyming within each other so many different ways.
Internal rhymes.
Yeah, exactly. Starving, the Marvin, the kindergarten, get it on, word is bond, like the whole thing is just like, you could break it. They have those like sort of color-coded, bar breakdown things like
it's called like, spitted.
Yeah. So I bet if you put these two bars in, you're gonna get like what 4 or 5 different colors.
Color. No. Well, I would say word is bond and kindergarten.
Yeah. But then
Gary, do you know about spitted?
Nope.
Gary, do you know about this? It's like chances are some of your favorite songs are on this, and there's a few different YouTube channels. I know Spitted is one of them where they literally they'll play the song, the verse. and then put the lyrics up, and then as the words are being said, they color coordinate the rhyming syllables.
Cool.
To just so like one of the best ones to watch in my opinion is Inspector Deck's Triumph one. Just how many different colors are in there. But the also really impressive ones are the ones like if like Doom's Kabang verse on the Czarface record, or what Dion just said, the color the staying the same color but in interesting ways of varying the rhyme. It's very that's a dope line, Dion. Everyone, that you could find it on YouTube, just like
just like us, just like you can find
rhyme analysis. Yeah, we're there too, man. So Dion, that absolutely, and there's just it's a career filled with examples just like that. You know what I mean? One of my favorite lines of his is on Meth and Redman's first album when he goes, "It's Funk Doc, where the weed at, bitch. I speed backwards down a one-way street, man. Believe that shit?" Like, that's like just dope. You know what I mean? Speed backwards down a one-way street. But, my point was one thing, I don't know if it's as popular as it maybe was a few years ago, but the BET ciphers were like, the BET Awards, the best part of that is, these ciphers. They get a collection of MCs in the room. I'd say the best one ever is probably the Shady 2.0 cipher with Eminem and Slaughterhouse. There's a great one with Black Thought, Mos Def, and Eminem. Really cool collaborations and live spitting goes down on those things, right? And I remember one year the Def Squad, Eric Sermon, Redman, Keith Murray. I don't know who else was on it.
I think those three are the Def Squad.
They are the Def. I think there might have been another MC in there. I don't know. That is the Def Squad, but I don't know if anyone else was involved in that cipher. Redman, probably in his late 40s at that point, literally herbed every one of these MCs that are supposed to be at the top of their game right now. Herbed every other cipher, stood out, and made waves, and articles were written about it. You know what I mean? Like, he's just cut from a different cloth. He is God level on the mic. He's so fucking good. Check out the BET.
It's from 2015, I think. I'm looking up right now. I think it's the 2015 Def Squad BET cipher.
He made all the current rappers literally pale in comparison to his performance.
I love seeing that shit too.
Me too. We really we went in here, guys. I don't know how much we even didn't cover. I mean,
the only thing we didn't really cover that we could sort of end on is just the general sample work on this album, and how much we started talking about funk in general, but I still don't think we really showed or talked about or conveyed how funk heavy this album was. Pretty much every album, almost every song on this has at least one sample from either classic funk song or just a general.
Did you hear the P-Funk sample that Dre used also?
Yeah. So that's I think that there's a couple. Are you talking about from when I Come Around? Because when I Come Around has a couple of songs that a bunch of the songs sample.
I can't tell you the title of the song, but I know that I think it was Nothing But a G Thing used the same sample. If I'm not mistaken, but I heard it somewhere. I
know for When I Come Around, one of the parts of the sample is Hydra by Grover Washington Jr., which if you play the song within the first 2 seconds, you're gonna recognize this song. It's the one it's like doom 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 doom. A bunch of different songs. Check the Rhyme sampled it. One More Chance sampled the drums. On that same song, Seventh Heaven by Gwen Guthrie. Another song. It's that part of the song When I Come Around where it's like those spacey horns. Friend of mine, sure. Biggie uses it. One by Busta and Janet uses it. So whatever. But that's the song. And then the third one is a line that a lot of rap songs use. What we gonna do is go back. Way back. That line is
highly sampled.
Yeah, highly sampled from a song called Troglodyte by the Jimmy Castor Bunch.
Whoa.
The song itself is in parentheses caveman. It's interesting, but okay. A lot of people take that one line. But yeah, the point is you're right. He's using samples that just it's kind of a combination of songs that a lot of other artists use, and then there's a bunch how many people are actually sampling from a bunch of funkadelic. Most of it is gonna be Parliament, probably, right?
Right.
Like a lot of people.
I'd say a lot of the sample sources in hip hop are usually Parliament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was it. I mean, nothing really specific. Just like the reliance. And if you look at the Who sample page on this, it's just like it's really cool. Like you kind of want to make you kind of almost want to make like a Spotify playlist on just the songs that he samples and just throw that on the fucking party. And there you go. You got 2 hours of funk. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And as a lover of funk music, that it's like one of my most listened to genres. Like I go far beyond P-Funk, but I'm a huge P-Funk fan. Music like this really, really resonates with me on like you know what I mean. The musical aspect of this album, I loved. I really did. No matter how messy it was, its roots were in part of my roots. So I really loved it.
Yep,
for sure.
Yep.
Gary, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, just Busta Rhymes type vibe, Dragon vibes on this album, which I loved.
Definitely.
And that was informative. There's a DIYM somewhere on this album, but I'm trying to find
it. There is. He goes, yo, do you hear about the Deacon? And he goes, nah, man, what Deacon? He goes, my Deacon in your mouth.
That's good.
Yeah.
What song was that?
I was like, man, this guy needed to hang out with us in 8th grade.
I don't know where that is. Somewhere toward the end. Anyway, that was anyway. I was happy we spent the week listening to this album.
Yeah,
it was great experience, guys.
Same here.
So, anything else, D?
I guess the last thing I was gonna say is going back to that song, "Can't Wait." I think when I'm thinking about it, that's probably originally the reason, ultimately, why I wanted to listen to this song, because that song is great, and it's also used as part of the intro music to one of my favorite podcasts, one of my biggest podcast influences, which is Jalen and Jacoby. It's an ESPN podcast, but it's it talks sports, but they also talk like a lot of pop culture and everything. Jalen Rose is the Jalen of Jalen and Jacoby. And part of the intro is they use the line where he goes, "I pop the trunk, come, now give me that pump pump." Like that's part of, like they have like an intro song that uses this other old funk song called "Got to Give the People What They Want." Got to give the people, yeah. So and then they slice it in with this, and they end the song with the part of the chorus of "Can't Wait," where she goes, "I can't wait to get it on. I can't wait to get it on," which itself is from a song that was Gary in a GTA song. GTA game, Vice City. The song that goes all night long. Really popular song, but that "Can't Wait," like that, those words comes from that song. It was actually said in 2 different verses in the song. It's never said back to back in the original song, but this is another example of taking an original song and sort of making a new music out of it. Where he goes like it sounds natural, where like when she's saying it back to back in 2 different ways, it sounds like a natural chorus, but in the original song, it just ends like 2 separate verses in that song. Anyway, bottom line is ultimately, like, just sort of the idea of even doing this podcast, one of my influences again was Jalen Jacoby, and this song is a big part of their intro. And so for that reason, I think in the back of my mind, I think that's ultimately why I had this album in my list is from that. So it's all meta. It's all it all connects to each other. But yeah, just my general closing thought, it was just echoing what you guys said. It was great. I mean, it's great 90s boom bap, really classic. Even though it veered off a lot, it had like those like sort of space themes and everything. But so did Dell, so did Kool Keith, so did MF Doom. I heard some ODB influence in here. Definitely heard some Busta. So yeah, it's just clearly a dude that's just like a humble dude that respects his peers, respects the music, respects the craft. And even this album that he himself has said that he's not the biggest fan of, you can still tell he put effort into it. Like I'm listening to it and I'm fully enjoying it. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much my closing thought. This album was great. It was dark, but it still had that silly Redman vibe. And I fully enjoyed it. Gary, thank you for picking my album.
Thanks for doing your homework.
I think my closing statement on this is that, like, if this album with awesome shit on it is Redman's like dark horse, or if it's Redman's stepchild of an album, that just shows you how incredible Redman is.
Exactly.
Because this album's great. It's just
exactly.
It might not be on that perfection level that he later attained, or previously. But sorry, I'm gonna let that siren pass.
Yeah. I was gonna say you wanna.
So my final thoughts are that if this album with so many awesome songs, awesome verses, dope beats is Redman's bastard stepchild of an album, that's just evidence that Redman is one of the greatest of all time, because this is a great album. And if this is considered his weakest or most critically panned, then he's got quite an incredible record of releases, behind him. He's incredible, and I'm sure we're gonna do another Redman album eventually. So guys, my pick for next week, and before I get to my pick, I apologize. I just want to say, thank you to our friend Fred, the Red Walrus. Incredible producer. His interludes add this extra element and really solidify us as a hip hop podcast. So thank you. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
You're the man. Check him out, Red Walrus on Bandcamp. Download his shit. He's great. My next week's pick is someone who's also highly rooted in funk. Someone who shares a lot of the same approaches as Redman, and I think this album really pushed me to pick this album that we listened to this week. Really pushed me to pick this next album, which is Del the Funky Homo Sapiens. Both Sides of the Brain.
Ooh, okay.
My favorite.
I thought you may have been going 30-30, but Both Sides of the Brain. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm
this
into
one, I love 30-30. It's the classic, I'd say, but this is my favorite Del album, and Del is one of my all-time favorite MCs. Yeah. He's incredible. So
I haven't listened to Del in a while. Thank you for this. Yeah, this is gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good week, listeners. Highly recommend popping on Del the Funky Homo Sapiens album. By the way, such a great name.
Yeah. You gotta say the whole thing, just like Tribe Called Quest. Like it's not just Del, it's Del the Funky Homo Sapiens. You have to say it.
Certainly. Listen to Both Sides of the Brain. It is fucking awesome. And we'll see you next week. You've been listening to Do It Yourself Music Appreciation. We really appreciate you guys listening. Hope to see you next time. Peace.
What are you looking at?